Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk, brought to you by Adequest, your security and compliance partner. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I am the co-host of Secure Talk, and I'm here with
Hiram Machado.
Hiram, how are you?
I'm doing very good, Mark. What about yourself?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Ready to go.
Good, yeah. I'm excited to talk about today's topic, which is threat detection and protection, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So when we talk about threats, I think it might be useful before we jump into the detection and protection element to talk a little bit about the threat landscape as it is right now. And, you know, we can look at how the threats landscape has evolved. Maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, hackers were people that did it as a hobby. I mean, the stereotypical view is a high school kid in his parents' garage trying to hack into maybe his school network, just to kind of show off his skills in front of his friends, etc. These days, that's not the case, though, is it?
It evolved a lot, right, from that perspective, right?
Right.
There's more stuff on the internet today, right? There's more data and more things to do on the internet. Therefore, there's more interest as well, right?
Right. And these days, hackers typically aren't always out there just to show off their skills. They're doing it for financial gain, and that can take the form of hacking in and stealing information, stealing sensitive data. It can take the form of a malware or ransomware campaign where somebody opens a corrupted file and it encrypts all the data on your system, and then you have to pay a ransom to unencrypt that data or to get the data returned to you. And so you're seeing a lot more action or activity for these amongst these hackers that are doing it for financial gain. And then you also see nation states who are getting into the game as well. And sometimes the nation states, what they're doing crosses over with the syndicates who are out there targeting financial gain. In fact, if we look at the WannaCry ransomware, the technology behind that was actually created by the U.S. government, by the NSA, somehow was leaked out onto the dark web, and some of the bad guys picked it up and made a bunch of money off of it.
And use it for their gain.
Exactly, and caused a lot of trouble in the process. But a lot of people who listen to this show, and a lot of the people that we meet, say, well, I'm not working for the large, the Equifaxes or the Sonys, so I probably don't need to worry about getting hacked. And really, the hacking or the successful intrusions breaches doesn't really happen all that often, because I just read about it maybe once a month or something like that. But that's wrong on a couple counts, right?
Well, that is true, Mark, 5 years ago,
okay.
Perhaps.
Right.
But the reality is things are changing so much right now, and with the advancement of technology around the bot technology, right, where computers can emulate people, the machine learning and artificial intelligence, a lot of these hacks are now automated, so they can do attempts to hack or break into by the millions in a matter of seconds. So right now, anything that's plugged to the internet is a target, and hackers, they don't really care. They just launch their scanning, go after whatever they find, and once they break in, then they'll figure out whether there is something there or not. Therefore, you are as exposed to, as an individual, as exposed to potential hacking as the larger corporations.
Right. So when hacking was a manual process, hackers, like all of us, are limited with time and resources. They want to go after the big fish. But now that they can automate these campaigns, they can basically go after anybody or any organization, regardless of the size. And so you can't assume that just because you hear about these breaches occasionally in the media, that it's not happening. It's happening every day, and you can't assume that whether you're a small, medium-sized organization or just an individual, that the hackers aren't coming after you. In fact, if you have a presence on the internet, you will be hit. And there are a lot of famous quotes out there from people who are in the FBI and other organizations. It's almost getting to be cliche these days, but you know the whole thing about it's not if and when when you'll be hacked or if you'll be hacked. It's actually, I said that wrong. It's not if you'll be hacked, it's when. And what's the other one about?
I like the one from the former XBI director. He said there are only two types of companies in America: the ones that have been hacked and the ones that don't know yet they have been hacked.
Exactly, right. And then the permutation of that one, or the iteration of that one, is the ones that have been hacked or the ones that haven't been hacked yet. But in many cases, I mean, we're not the largest company in the world, but we get hit on a regular basis.
Oh, if you check our logs, and we are very comfortable and well protected. But when you look at our logs, we're being hit almost every day, and every week when I look at the logs, it's dozens and dozens of attempts to penetrate our network. Something interesting to highlight, Mark, is that an average intruder, once they penetrate your network, if they can't find an account with which they can go into your network, an average intruder stays on your network for about 180 days.
So what are they doing during that time?
Well, there is a lot of things they might be doing. Number one, they are watching what's going on, right? And there is something now called social engineering. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah, and the social engineering is really when hackers are trying to understand who is who within that organization, who sends information with what type of information, and it's very common, and we have seen some of our customers dealing with this, situations where all of a sudden a person in an organization who is a controller, for instance, who has the ability to perhaps transfer money and transact money in that organization, all of a sudden receives an email from the CEO saying, hey, I'm busy right now, but I need you to transfer such money quickly. And often they go all the way to the extent of figuring out, looking at the agenda of that CEO, knowing that he is indeed in a meeting, right? And send an email to that controller, who they now know is used to receive an email from the CEO asking for money transfer, right? And they emulate being the CEO and say, I need that money right now. I'm in a meeting, I'm busy, can you please transfer the money? Right. They're usually trying to
create some sense of urgency.
A sense of urgency or fear, right? And cause that person to act on it. And if you don't have the right controls and security in place, and by the way, this is happening all over the place. I have seen this over and over in the last several months.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a security association meeting recently, and they had an investigative forensic security specialist there. And he was talking about a recent case where a titling agency, somebody had hacked into their system, was observing the emails. What they would do is they would see when somebody was ready to close on a house and wire their money, to escrow. They intercepted the information, and then they sent an email to the paying party, to the buying party who was going to transfer the money, saying, we cannot take a cashier's check. You need to wire the money. And they created an address that looked almost exactly like the normal address, but it was one letter off, and the people wired $500,000. Fortunately, in this case, they were able to recover, I think it was like $480,000 of the $500,000, but that's still a $20,000 hit. And you can imagine this goes on countless times a day, right? And sometimes they're not able to recover any of the money. So you have to be careful out there. You have to be cautious.
And the interesting thing, Mark, is that a lot of that doesn't really make the news, right?
Right.
You hear a lot about these Equifax and the big ones, the Target a few years ago, Sony not long ago, but you don't hear about all of these smaller attacks and that are happening daily.
Right. So I've heard you say before, and I think this is common in the industry, that you should assume breach.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, it used to be that people spend a lot of time and focus on developing capabilities or technology to protect your environment, right? But protecting is one thing. The analogy here is, assume that you have been broken into, right? And then now you need to think about, okay, how do I contain? If I have a breach, how do I contain to minimize the impact of that breach, right? And basically, you have to have different gates of security all the way along, with the understanding that at some point somebody will break in. It's almost impossible to protect. Technology is advancing so quickly, so fast, and it's not all about only protecting. It's about protecting, understanding how to react should you break in, and have the right level of responses.
Okay, so what you're saying is, if somebody gains access to your system, you should have some gates in place so that you kind of compartmentalize their access. So you can create containers,
right,
where your information, your data is you might have access to this area, but I'm not going to be able to get in access to everything. Is that
right?
correct?
It's like having checking points, right? You have a checkpoint every way through, so you can validate and revalidate if that user, if that transaction is indeed a valid transaction.
Yeah, and then at every one of these checkpoints, if your system can detect some kind of anomalous behavior, or there is some other type of detection there, maybe you can force some type of authentication or something, right?
Yeah.
So
I think it would be nice to explain anomalous behavior, because you put something well and.
Well, I mean, for anomalous behavior is basically something out of the ordinary, right? And you mentioned that the hackers sometimes they'll get on your network and sit there, and they'll be watching, and they'll see what people are doing, and they will try to kind of model their behavior based upon what they're seeing. But all of a sudden they say, you know what, now's the time to go for the big data dump, right? And they're going to go after some files, some sensitive files. And, if your system is set up correctly, they'll notice that, hey, you know what, the person with those credentials has never accessed those files before, or never tried to download them, or try to share them. This is kind of strange. Maybe we should flag this, or maybe we should put a wall up on it. So, it's basically detecting something that's kind of out of the ordinary, and it's really a useful tool to detect intruders.
Yeah, I like the impossible travel one, right?
Yeah. So why don't you explain that one?
Yeah, well, the impossible travel is when the system is basically tracking where you're logging in from, and if you log in from, United States at 5 minutes later, you are logging in from China or Nepal, right? That's considered impossible travel. You can't possibly be there, and that could be a sign of your account is compromised. And so if you have the right systems in place, the system will basically flag or even interrupt that additional login from doing anything on the network, and protect your systems.
That's a really good example, and something that every system should be set up to detect, I would think. Going back to the idea of setting up walls or gates or containers on your system or platform to contain these intruders if they happen to gain access, I like it's not necessarily a wall, but it is a barrier, the just-in-time permissions, which also kind of limit your exposure. Can you talk a little bit about the just-in-time permissions?
It is, yeah. That's very interesting new capability. You can see that on Azure. The current Microsoft Azure has that concept. So basically, if you think about threat, the number one accounts that are sought by any attacker is the administrator account, right? Generally speaking, the administrator has the keys of the kingdom, right? And can do anything in the network. So if an attacker get a hold of that account, he's the king. So what we do is to make sure that people have access to what they have administrative access only for the time that they need administrative access. So basically the concept is you keep everybody as a regular user, therefore with limited access to the network. And a administrator, somebody who may have the ability to elevate their credential to administrator, can activate his account as an administrator, will receive, therefore, a second factor authentication, MFA we call it, will receive a second way of authenticating himself, and then his account will be made an administrator account, so he can execute whatever he is supposed to execute on. And after a period of time, that account will just go back to being a regular user account. So the point is, if that account is ever compromised, the attacker will not have access to all of the,
Right,
will
and,
not have the
and
keys.
they won't have the ability to boost their authority level or to an admin because they won't be able to do that MFA, right?
They won't be able to respond to them.
In fact, AdaQuest actually created or developed a product that works with Microsoft Azure. It's it's called the EasyPIM.
The AdaQuest Azure EasyPIM. Yeah, it's a phone app just to make it easier for the user to activate his account. So if you're working with Azure, and in order to execute on that activation, you have to go to Azure portal and click a few clicks and then activate your account, receive the MFA on your phone, and then you are ready to go, right? So what we did was to simplify that process. So basically from your phone, you just log in on your phone, click activate my account, receive the MFA, and validate, and you are ready to go. So you don't have to go to Azure portal to activate your account. Also, from an Azure perspective, it also have a workflow for approval. So depending on how you set up your system, in order for you to activate your account, you may need somebody else to approve that activation. So again, with EasyPIM, you can on your phone, either request the activation of your account and or approve if you're.
If I wanted to take a look at EasyPIM and use that myself, I assume that I have to be, of course, an Azure user. Where can I get the EasyPIM app?
Yeah, Azure EasyPIM is available on iOS, for Android, and for Windows on their stores.
Okay.
So you just go to the store, look for Azure EasyPIM, and you see it right there.
Great, excellent. Let me ask you this. Let's talk a little bit about threat detection and protection. So what tools or processes would you advise, or what would you like to talk about in terms of detecting intrusions and then protecting against them?
Yeah. So usually when you think about threat, you want to think about three different things, right? There is the threat prevention, the threat detection, and response.
Okay.
Right? And you have to have capabilities around those three pillars, if you will, right? The reality is, when you think about this, an average enterprise company, they engage with anywhere between 50 to 60 different software solutions companies for protecting their infrastructure. It's crazy.
So 50 to 60 different
50 to 60 different
security vendors.
Vendors, right?
Okay.
When you think about, well, I need a firewall. Then I need something like to protect my email.
So antivirus.
Then I need an
malware
antivirus.
detection.
Then I need a malware detection. When they add that up, it's really the average enterprise will have as many as 50 to 60. So how do you reduce that? How do you control? And they have to work with each other, right?
Right.
So one of the things that Microsoft is doing, right, is they came up with the Microsoft Enterprise Mobility and Security.
Okay.
That's a package. And a lot of the capabilities around prevention, detection, and response, it's right there as one package, as one license. So when I think about it, I don't think Microsoft is there yet where they can really replace all of the 50 and 60 different security capabilities, but they're moving toward that. They're going that direction, right? And
well, if they can replace
half of
them,
it, it's already yeah.
Probably cut costs and saves me a big headache. But again, I want to go back to that specifically. Then, what tools or would you recommend for threat detection, protection, and response? I mean, can you give some examples?
Yeah. So if you are on Microsoft platform, the Azure Security Center is something that we like to use, right? So the Azure Security Center is, once you set it up, you have the ability to look at the activities around your network for malware detection, for antivirus detection, and you can really control your organization from that central place and see what's going on with your organization. That is what we use. That's how we monitor what's going on.
So what do you see when you're on that dashboard?
Yeah, on that dashboard flags you. First of all, it lists all of the malware attempts
Okay.
Successful and not successful ones. So, and if you have the right alerts in place, right, you'll be alerted right away if in case of a successful intrusion, and you can act on it right away, right? And that acting means you might change the password of an account because you know which account has been compromised. You might put in quarantine a specific account, but that is the primary kind of dashboard that we use to look at and see what's going on from a attack perspective.
Okay. Let's jump tracks a bit here, and let's talk about the importance of having a reliable information provider in terms of what I'm thinking about is patches that need updating, malware alerts, links that are obviously leading you in the wrong direction. I mean, if you're trying to figure out on your own, is this a good link? Is this a good email? And you're trying to update or inform all the people in your organization, it can be quite tough. But if you have some type of resource that's sharing that information with you, it can make your job easier, and especially if you can kind of automate that or embed that into your IT infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, that is when you look at the major cloud providers, and if you have any, most organizations today we have a hybrid environment, right, where they have some capabilities on-premise and some capabilities on the cloud, right? And if you're using a major cloud provider, most of them will have some very advanced capabilities around tracking what's going on, throughout the network, and applying any protection for everybody once they identify a threat. So in the case of Microsoft, they have about 400 billion authentications happening throughout their systems every month.
400 billion?
400 billion authentications happening every month. And they collect a lot of metadata about that 400 millions. And they can see trends, and they can see, often they see like the movement of a new attack happening. And once they identify that, they zoom into that issue. They analyze it. They apply the right protections when they identify it. And the interesting thing is they apply that throughout the entire
Office 365, user base,
Hotmail user base, and everybody gets protected. So there are some stories around the attacks that were initiated, and within, I remember that this last one that I read about, it took Microsoft about 12 hours between being a suspicion, right? They suspect on something, they start the investigation on that one thing, and 12 hours later, they had a fix that prevented that from spreading.
Wow.
So they basically identified that on a handful of customers, that happening. They zoomed in, and in 12 hours, they had a fix. And nobody else was.
So in some ways, and again, I'm not here to promote or sell Microsoft products or services. I guess the same can be said for any large cloud provider. But if you're using Office 365 or Azure, you're part of a big global community that is kind of set up to protect itself. And that community may get attacked on the other side of the planet, but is almost instantaneously able to share that information with the rest of the community all around the world. And you benefit from being that. But if you were just on your own, you're going to get hit because, as you said earlier, these attacks are automated.
It will happen. Everybody's
getting hit, but you're not going to benefit from being part of this global protective community. I don't know if that analogy makes sense or not, but I kind of feel that's the one of the benefits of that telemetry. And then if you look at a lot of the successful intrusions just come because companies have failed to keep their patches updated, or they don't have a good patch policy. They've forgotten to update. And I think if we talk about Equifax, there was a patch that had been available for a couple months, and they'd failed to install that. And so, one thing is you need to have an effective a patch policy, but you need to be attached to some organization or some resource that's updating you and saying, hey, be, alert, here's a patch that's available, you need to install it, right? And if you're working off on your own, that's a little bit difficult. But again, if you're part of one of these global communities, there is some benefit there. Does that make sense?
I would go one step further from companies not keeping up with their patches of their softwares. In all honesty, most of the clients that we start working with, small and mid-sized clients, most of them will have software altogether that are no longer supported, right? So not only they did not keep up with patching the software, they're still using operational systems that are no longer support. Therefore, there isn't even a patch for them. And often there are holes and security gaps known by attackers on those softwares that are no longer being worked on or supported by because they ran out of support. So the situation is more critical than just not running the patches.
Because in that case, there's no patch available.
In that case, it is
no longer supported. What would you advise an organization where they have devices or operating systems, applications that are no longer supported by the vendor? What would your advice be?
Yeah, often what we have seen is they don't even realize that is the case, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say for every small and mid-sized organizations, number one thing is get an inventory, get an understanding of where you are, what kind of licenses you have, and whether those licenses are up to date, right? And if they are not up to date, take action, right? It's very important that you take action. You talk about the WannaCry, right? Early on in this show.
The WannaCry ransomware, right?
Ransomware, right? And a lot of it was Windows XP.
Okay.
Right now, we're talking about large organizations, primarily in the UK, that were hit, right? Primarily in the UK, large hospital healthcare organizations is still using Windows XP from several years ago, right? And that's how they got in the first place. And the Windows XP, deficiencies are well known by many hackers. So my advice is get an inventory of what you have, understand whether they are, up to date with patch or not, and execute on it.
Okay. Well, we're running towards the end of our time here. Maybe we can do a brief summary here. Basically, the threat landscape has changed. Everybody is going to get hit. It doesn't matter how small you are, where you are. If you're on the internet, you're going to get hit. And a lot of these campaigns, most of them are automated, right? And they're going to come after you. What you need to do, though, is you need to have a system in place. You should assume breach. And so if you assume breach, that means that you've set up your IT infrastructure in a way that if somebody gains access to one part of your infrastructure, you have gates or barriers in place that will limit their access to the rest. You can also use things like just-in-time permission to make sure that nobody has the admin credentials on 24/7. You need to be plugged into some sort of telemetry that will let you know or update your system that, hey, these are bad links, this is malware, this is a phishing campaign. You need to be aware of some of the social engineering things that you talked about. And then, if there's a breach, you need to be able to also kind of monitor and see what damage has been done. Was there anything else?
No, I think that summarized it. So just, I think my hope and goal here is that people that listen to this broadcast, that they now understand that is actions to be taken, and they go back to their organizations and they look into what's their current status is, so they can make a decision and act on it.
Excellent. Well, Hiram, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
This was another episode of Secure Talk, brought to you by AdaQuest, your security and compliance partner. Wish you all a very happy and safe, secure week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.